So yesterday, Christine and I, we went to a restaurant to eat, and on the way into the restaurant, we were stopped by people who gave us the little red poppy flower. Probably have seen that many times before, probably maybe even got one yourself. Memorial Day, to remind us, Memorial Day weekend from the American Legion Auxiliary, a memoriam and made for the benefit of veterans. And so today we talk about veterans to a certain extent, although I don't really want to go so far in that direction. I have to share an admittance with you. And that is that I think Memorial Day for pastors is one of the hardest days to preach on. Because what we have to do is we have to preach about a lot of different things that may seem to go counter to the Christian message. Yes, we lift up our troops. Yes, we lift up all of the battles and things that we fought in, and we look at them. But this year, I think especially, at least as I'm looking at it, there's another thing that comes to roost. We can get all nostalgic and talk in a lot of hero talk about things that happened 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago. But yet, today, we are facing our own wars, are we not? On a lot of different levels. And so now it's not really the question of war or troops, at least for this year. As much as it's something that's been bothering me as I've been watching the news and thinking about the direction our world seems to be going in, and that is the increasing level of violence that we see in our culture, in our world. And where is it all going? It's very easy, isn't it, to be judgmental. It's very easy to sit back and look at past generations and write them all off as fools or as people who were just led astray when we have X amount of years of peace and tranquility and luxury separating us from those years. Well, what were those crazy people thinking back then? Why did they do this? The Monday morning quarterbacking, right, of those who have the ability to do that. But I don't feel that luxury this year. And I feel myself more and more as one of those people from a bygone era who had to juggle their Christianity with modern day events. And where does it all go? And it's interesting, isn't it, the cast of characters that we have to deal with. I'm not going to get into all of that because then you'll mistake me for getting into politics, which I dread to get into. But isn't it interesting, the cast of characters who want what they want and where we seem to be going with all of this? I thought to myself, well, I'm going to talk about three things today. And the first thing that I'm going to talk about is a young lady, well, she's not so young anymore, who survived a bullet to the head. This would have been back in 2012. Isn't this interesting? This was just 10 years ago. And isn't it fascinating how we take our heroes and we throw them out so quickly. We discard them so quickly. And I'm talking about Malala. I think her last name is Yousafzai. Pakistani, do you even know who I'm talking about? Pakistani girl who was shot in the head. The other two girls that she was with, what was their sin? Their sin was wanting to be educated. And they were shot. Two of the girls were killed. And she rose to international heights for a moment because she was a survivor of the violence of the Taliban. Not if you've ever studied the Taliban, or if you know anything about the Taliban, really a whole lot. They are probably the most extreme Islamic movement in the world. Under the moniker of protection, they totally shut women down. There's no rights. Women have no rights. We are protecting them. will be what they say. And so she happens to be Pakistani, but of course it ties in as well, because now what is all of Afghanistan? And all of Afghanistan is now Taliban controlled. And so the U.S., well, we pulled out of Afghanistan August 20th, 2021. We couldn't wait to get out of there. We ran so fast, we left military equipment behind. I'm sorry, that's just a fact. And then on January 18th, well, guess who moved in of 2022? The Taliban. And actually, they moved in much more before that, the Taliban offensive in 2021. January 18th, 2022, they said, well, things are going to go back to the old ways. And so now the ladies are back in their burqas and they cannot be educated. And God forbid if they get caught with something as simple as makeup. What's our role in this? We talk about violence. Violence in the world. And I really don't think I have answers for you today, as much as I have the ability to ask, I hope, intelligent questions in regard to our Christian faith. Do we stay in Afghanistan for another 20 years and safeguard the lives of these women and lose another couple thousand veterans? Or do we say, well, that's just that part of the world. Let's just let it go. And then what do you do with Malala, who was a hero 10 years ago? But now, well, I hope, kiddo, you can just keep it up. Just keep working. And you can see, I hope, and feel the frustration. The frustration. Well, let's go to another one. Let's go to Ukraine. That's the elephant in the room right now, right? The Ukraine. What are we going to do with the Ukraine? What should we do with the Ukraine? Should we do anything with the Ukraine? Well, I guess maybe it's a little too late to be asking those questions. I watch the videos on YouTube and other places. I see the devastation. I know of the death and the destruction. What is the place in the Christian faith of us going into the Ukraine, at least with our weapons and our influence, satellite images, and helping with intelligence and things of that nature? And I don't know that there's really any easy answers to that. Do we stand by and allow these people to be wiped out by the superior force of the Russian army? Superior in numbers, anyway. Or, as some of us have done, and I've seen it, right? I've driven down the hill and I've seen Ukrainian flags planted in front yards where I never thought I'd see a Ukrainian flag flying. Just always make sure you have the United States flag on top, otherwise you're violating the flag order, right? Or we go on Facebook and we see people's faces or their sites with the Ukrainian flag. And so what are we saying when we do those things? What's our role when we do those things? Are we going to be just like, with Malala and say, hey kiddo, well, I hope it all works out for you? Or as we pledged, what was it, $200 million in aid initially for Stinger weapons and various things, and now just recently, if I'm not mistaken, $22 billion? What is our role in all of this? What is our role, not necessarily so much in international politics as in violence or the supporting of violence? And there's no easy answers, is there? We find ourselves flip-flopping back and forth. Well, we're going to leave Afghanistan, but now we're going to become involved in the Ukraine. And then I've got one more whopper to throw in your lap. Let's talk about the little wars. What about one guy? One guy with a gun who decides to go into an elementary school and kill, what was it, 18 children? I think the total was 21 after they figured the teachers in, maybe more. What do you do with the little war? What do you do with the power of the devil? And yes, it is the power of the devil when the officer says, scream if you need help. And when the child screams, that's the one who takes the bullet and dies. And then I have to think to myself, personally, in my own personality, what would I do? What would I do? And I know what I would do, but I'm not going to tell you, because I don't want it on the internet. Ask me in my office sometime. But how does this either go hand in hand with our Christianity or go against it? And I hope I'm not the only one up here struggling with these issues. I hope throughout the week as you watch our world, and yes, on Memorial Day we can talk about troops and wars, and yes, we're so thankful for everything that our uncles and great-grandfathers and grandfathers and mothers, and we're so thankful for what they've done. But yet all of a sudden, I don't know, it seems this year, to a certain extent, we might almost be them a little bit. What kind of decisions did they have to make at the drop of a hat in World War II? What kind of decisions had to be made at the drop of a hat in Vietnam or the Korean conflict? And yeah, it's very easy to, I know I haven't covered all the wars, but I think the luxury's over, isn't it? The luxury of laughing at those people and saying, oh, they're just a bunch of goof-offs. I mean, they didn't know what they were doing back then. Here we are with our satellites and our smartphones and our robotics, and we still seem to be walking through the same muck. Or a madman seems to be dragging us through the same muck. We go to our scriptures. We go to our scriptures today and we see what violence begets. As we go to our first reading and we see Paul and Silas, violence. What do we see? These men are advocating customs that are not lawful for us as Romans to adopt or deserve or observe. And so the crowd attacks them and beats them with rods and drags them to prison. What's their role? Do they resist? Do they flail about with fists? Or do they allow themselves to be arrested and taken to prison? And maybe they didn't have much of a choice. God comes through for them in this instance. God comes through for them in a way that we like to read about. We like to read about the magnificence of God today in our first reading as they're singing hymns and there's loud noises and the chains are broken and the doors all fall down. I like that story. But I don't necessarily like the story of Stephen, who is the first church martyr who gets killed and stoned to death. Where is God in that? Oh, he's there. He's there as Stephen looks up to heaven. He's there, but he's there in a much different way. See, it's not easy. And this is one of the things that I've always tried to impress upon people is that Christianity is not easy. I believe that Christianity is the hardest religion in the world to follow. Because all of the other religions, they allow me at the last moment to really be selfish if I want to or if I need to. I can think of myself and either retreat from the world or go after and kill with glee in my heart those that I perceive to be my enemy. And I can kill them in the name of God. But Christianity doesn't allow that. Christianity makes it difficult. Christianity has a Savior that says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." And he goes on and talks about loving your neighbor and hating your enemy. I think I know what that's about. I don't think Jesus is telling us to be the perennial victim. After all, I don't know about you, but I only got two cheeks, and when I get that second one slapped, I kind of know who the person is that's standing in front of me. I don't think Jesus is asking us to become our enemy. I don't think he's saying lay down and let the other person steamroll right over the top of you and become your enemy. Where would we be? Where would we be in the history of the world if we would have allowed that to happen in any X amount of locations? And we can look at so many other situations that are so madly out of control. North Korea firing off their third missile test, which supposedly can reach the U.S. border. How afraid do you want to be? But it brings up questions. The question of violence. And the question of where does it fit in? Martin Luther helps us a bit. He writes in a document called "Can Soldiers Too Be Saved?" He talks about how we should only lift weapons and behave in a violent manner in the defense of ourselves and our family and our friends and our way of life, in the defense of that. But as we can see with matters, let's just say today, of the Ukraine, where does that begin and where does that end? Where does defense begin and where does it end? And who do we defend and how far do we go? They're all questions that we have to ask and answer. Otherwise, the only option is just to run away. And that doesn't solve anything other than emboldening enemies. I wish I could give you a happy sermon today. The only thing that I can tell you is that God walks with us through it all. God ultimately is in control of it all. And in the end, when everything turns out and we're able to look back, as we have done probably in so many other instances in our lives, remember how terrible high school was. And then remember how terrible college was, or whatever. We can look back and we can see that a lot of things turned out for the best. I hope and I pray that God is with us in such a way, especially in light of the little wars and the bigger ones that we have to deal with in the headlines. So many other problems to throw on the pile. Today we will leave it at that. It's important for us to know that God walks with us through it all. That when we put our faith and our trust in Him, He will give us the answers, even though they may be bitter. Remember, in the Holy Scriptures, God's answers don't always have the taste of candy. Sometimes they can be bitter. But God never abandons His people. Never. Through it all. So this Memorial Day, we have some things to think about. I actually think this year we're closer kin with those folks in the cemetery over there who lived through it. I think they'd probably say, "See, my child, it's not so easy, is it? It's not so easy. When you're in the moment, what do you do? And what decision do you make? But let the Lord go with you, for the Lord will redeem you." That's the good message from the folks that have gone ahead of us today. May we think upon them. May we celebrate our troops, those that are steadfast and loyal to our country. And may we see ourselves through the mire that seems to be before us, the violence in great way and small. Amen.